Black struggling single mom saves millionaire CEO from heart attack, but his first call shocked everyone. Get away from me. You're disgusting. Maya Williams was backing away in horror from billionaire Alexander Sterling's hospital bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the phone he'd just used to make the most shocking call of his life. Maya, please let me explain. Alexander reached for her desperately, his heart monitor beeping frantically as his blood pressure spiked. Don't touch me, she screamed, her voice echoing through the ICU corridor as nurses came running. I saved your life, and this is who you really are? This is the first person you called. The black single mother who'd performed CPR on this white CEO just hours earlier now looked at him like he was a monster, tears streaming down her face as the truth of his identity, and his first phone call after nearly dying, shattered everything she thought she knew about the man whose life she'd saved. You're not who I thought you were, Maya whispered, her voice breaking. You're exactly who I was warned people like you would be. And with that, she walked out of his life forever, or so she thought. Because what neither of them knew was that this was only the beginning of a story that would expose the darkest secrets of Chicago's elite and test whether love could truly conquer all. Before we get deep into today's story, I really want to know where you are watching from across the world. Please, drop in the comment section where you're watching. Hit the subscribe button if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have created something very special just for you, another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Once again, welcome to Mr. Paul's Stories, where we come together like old friends, wrapped in the warmth of stories that light up our souls. Now, let's begin today's story. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the pre-dawn darkness of the cramped Brooklyn apartment like a blade. Keisha Williams slapped it silent before it could wake 8-year-old Malik, who lay curled in the pull-out couch that doubled as their living room. She held her breath, listening to his steady breathing, then exhaled relief into the cold February air. 4:30 a.m. Another day in paradise. She tiptoed to the kitchenette, her bare feet finding every creaky floorboard by memory. The coffee maker gurgled to life, a small luxury she couldn't really afford but desperately needed. While it brewed, she pulled on her hospital scrubs, the pale blue fabric worn thin at the knees and elbows. 3 jobs meant 3 different uniforms, but this was the one that mattered most. Mount Sinai paid the rent. Through the frost-etched window, she could see Manhattan's skyline glittering like scattered diamonds across the East River. Somewhere in those towers of glass and steel, people were making more money in an hour than she made in a month. The thought used to make her bitter. Now it just made her tired. Mama. Malik's sleepy voice drifted from the couch. Go back to sleep, baby. Ms. Rodriguez will be here at 7. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of childhood that lingered despite everything else falling apart around them. 27 blocks away, in a corner office on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Financial Tower, Alexander Sterling was already 3 espressos deep into his morning. The Wall Street Journal lay spread across his mahogany desk, but his attention was fixed on the numbers scrolling across his monitors. Futures trading, currency fluctuations, the pulse of global markets that never slept. At 38, Alex had built an empire from nothing but ambition and ruthless precision. Sterling Capital Management controlled assets worth over $2 billion. His penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was featured in Architectural Digest. His Armani suits cost more than most people's monthly salary. Yet as he watched the sun rise over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gold and possibility, he felt nothing but the familiar ache of emptiness that no amount of success could fill. His phone buzzed. Another text from his assistant about the charity gala next week, some fundraiser for underprivileged children that his PR team insisted would be good for his image. He deleted it without reading the details. Charity was just another business expense, another way to minimize taxes and maximize reputation. The elevator chimed softly as his personal assistant, Margaret, arrived with his daily schedule printed on cream-colored paper. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Your first meeting is at 8:30 with the Harrison Group, followed by—" "Cancel everything after lunch," he said without looking up from his screens. "I have that dinner with the Japanese investors tonight, and I need time to prepare." Margaret nodded and disappeared as silently as she'd arrived. This was Alex's world, efficient, predictable, insulated. Everyone wanted something from him, and he gave them exactly what they needed to keep his machine running smoothly. Emotional complications were for people who couldn't afford to avoid them. Back in Brooklyn, Keisha was discovering that her ancient Honda Civic had decided to die overnight. She turned the key again and again, listening to the engine wheeze and sputter before falling silent. The temperature gauge had been running hot for weeks, but repairs cost money she didn't have. "Come on, baby," she whispered, patting the dashboard like it might respond to kindness. "Just get me through today." But the car was done. Completely, utterly dead. She grabbed her purse and ran for the subway, her breath forming clouds in the bitter morning air. If she was late to Mount Sinai again, they'd write her up. 3 write-ups meant termination, and she already had 2. The Q train was delayed, signal problems, the conductor announced with practiced indifference, and Keisha found herself pressed against the subway doors, watching precious minutes tick away on her phone. By the time she emerged from a Union Square station, she was 20 minutes late and running through the crowded streets of Manhattan in her nurse's clogs, weaving between tourists and office workers who moved with the casual confidence of people who never worried about losing their jobs over a dead car battery. She was crossing the plaza in front of the Meridian Financial Tower, cutting through to reach the hospital, when she saw him. The man in the expensive coat was clutching his chest, his face gray with pain as he stumbled toward a bench. Other pedestrians flowed around him like water around a stone, too busy with their own lives to notice that someone was dying right in front of them. But Keisha noticed. She always noticed. What do you think drives some people to help strangers while others just walk by? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Training kicked in before conscious thought could interfere. She dropped her purse and ran toward him, her 3 years of nursing school and 5 years on the cardiac unit crystallizing into pure instinct. "Sir," she called out, reaching him just as his knees buckled. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes found hers, pale blue, wide with terror and confusion. This was Alexander Sterling, though she didn't know it yet. All she saw was a human being in crisis, and that was enough. "I think," he gasped, his words coming in shallow bursts. "I think I'm having a heart attack." Keisha was already dialing 911 with one hand while feeling for his pulse with the other. Fast, irregular, thready. Not good. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice calm and professional despite the chaos erupting around them as other people finally began to notice. "Alex," he managed. "Alexander Sterling." The name meant nothing to her. Rich or poor, everyone's blood ran the same color red. "Stay with me, Alex," Keisha said, her voice cutting through the morning chaos like a lifeline. She knelt beside him on the cold concrete, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm a nurse. You're going to be okay." Alexander's world had narrowed to a pinpoint of crushing pain in his chest, radiating down his left arm like liquid fire. The familiar sounds of Manhattan, Honking cars, chattering pedestrians, the distant rumble of construction, faded into white noise. All he could focus on was this woman's face, her dark eyes filled with a competence and compassion he hadn't seen in years. "Can't breathe." He wheezed, his perfectly knotted Hermes tie suddenly feeling like a noose around his throat. "I know, honey. I know." Keisha loosened his tie with practiced efficiency, her fingers working quickly while she kept her eyes locked on his. "The ambulance is coming. Just focus on my voice, okay? What do you do for work, Alex?" It was a standard technique. Keep the patient talking, keep them conscious, keep them connected to the world of the living. But as Alexander tried to form words, he realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had asked him about himself with genuine interest rather than calculated networking. "I manage money," he gasped. Even in crisis, he couldn't bring himself to boast about his billions. "That's good. That's real good." Keisha checked her watch. The ambulance should arrive any minute. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. "You got family, Alex? Someone we should call?" The question hit him like another wave of chest pain. Family. When was the last time he'd spoken to his sister in California? His parents had been gone for 5 years, and he'd attended their funerals like business meetings, appropriate, efficient, emotionally contained. "No," he whispered, and the word tasted like ash. "No family." Keisha's heart clenched. She'd seen that look before in a hospital, the particular kind of pain that came not from physical trauma but from profound loneliness. Here was a man in an $8,000 coat who had no one to call in his darkest moment. "Well, you got me right now," she said firmly, taking his trembling hand in both of hers. "And I'm not going anywhere." The paramedics arrived like a whirlwind of organized chaos. 2 young men with equipment bags and a stretcher, shouting medical terminology that Alexander didn't understand, but that seemed to calm Keisha considerably. 42-year-old male, chest pain radiating to left arm, pulse 120 and irregular, Keisha rattled off as she stood to give them room. "Started approximately 8 minutes ago. He's responsive but diaphoretic." "You medical?" one of the paramedics asked as he attached EKG leads to Alexander's chest. "Cardiac nurse at Mount Sinai." Alexander watched this exchange through a haze of pain and medication. They'd given him something for the chest pain that made everything feel slightly surreal. This woman, this stranger, was speaking a language of care and competence that belonged to a world he'd never inhabited. In his universe, problems were solved with money and influence. But money couldn't restart a failing heart, and influence couldn't breathe life back into dying tissue. "ST elevation in leads 2, 3, and AVF," the paramedic called out. "We need to move. Now." As they loaded him onto the stretcher, Alexander reached out and caught Keisha's wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. "Come with me," he said, the words tumbling out before his rational mind could stop them. "Please." Keisha glanced at her watch. She was already 45 minutes late for her shift. Mount Sinai's cardiac unit would be short-staffed, patients would be waiting for medications, and her supervisor would be documenting another infraction in her file. But this man, this stranger who had no family to call, was looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. "I'll meet you at the hospital," she promised. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and Alexander disappeared into a world of flashing lights and urgent voices. Keisha stood on the sidewalk for a moment, catching her breath and trying to process what had just happened. Around her, Manhattan had already moved on. pedestrians flowing past the small bloodstain on the concrete where Alexander had collapsed as if nothing significant had occurred. But something had occurred. Something that would change both their lives forever. 20 minutes later, Keisha burst through the doors of Mount Sinai's emergency department, still wearing her coat and clutching her purse. She'd taken the subway straight here instead of reporting to her floor, a decision that would cost her dearly when her supervisor discovered her absence. "Where's the heart attack patient from Meridian Plaza?" she asked the triage nurse. "Trauma 2. They're prepping him for emergency catheterization." The nurse looked up from her computer. "You know him?" I found him. I rode with the ambulance." It wasn't technically true, but it was close enough. She pushed through the doors into the trauma bay and found Alexander hooked up to a dozen different monitors, his face pale but more peaceful now that the pain medication had taken full effect. A cardiologist she recognized, Dr. Patterson from the cath lab, was reviewing his EKG strips. "Massive anterior MI," Dr. Patterson was saying to his resident. "We need to get him upstairs immediately. Time is muscle." "Alex," Keisha said softly, approaching the bed. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw her, something like relief flooded his features. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came." She took his hand again, noting that his color was already better, his pulse stronger on the monitor. "They're going to take real good care of you. Dr. Patterson is the best." "I don't understand," Alexander said, his voice stronger now but filled with wonder. "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Why had she helped him? It went beyond her medical training, beyond simple human decency. Something about this man, about the profound loneliness she'd glimpsed in his eyes, had called to something deep within her own experience. "Because everybody deserves someone," she said simply. They were wheeling him toward the elevator when his phone rang. The sound was muffled, coming from inside his coat pocket, but insistent. Alexander tried to reach for it, but the restraints on the gurney made it impossible. "Should I answer it?" Keisha asked. "Please," he nodded. "It might be important." Keisha fished the phone from his coat, an expensive device that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The caller ID simply said, "Private number." She swiped to answer. "Hello? This is... I'm calling on behalf of Alexander Sterling. He's been in an accident." The voice that responded was female, cultured, with just a hint of an accent Keisha couldn't place. "Is this about the heart attack?" the woman asked calmly. Keisha's blood ran cold. How could this caller possibly know about the heart attack? It had happened less than an hour ago. She looked at Alexander, whose eyes had gone wide with shock and something that might have been fear. "I'm sorry, who is this?" Keisha asked. "Tell Alexander," the woman said, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the hospital corridor, "that Isabella sends her regards. And tell him, it's time to come home." The line went dead. Alexander's heart monitor began beeping frantically as his pulse spiked. Not from cardiac distress this time, but from pure emotional shock. "Who was that?" Keisha whispered, but Alexander's face had gone ashen in a way that had nothing to do with his medical condition. "Someone," he said quietly, "I thought was dead." The polished marble floors of Sterling Capital Management's executive floor had never seen scuffed nursing clogs before. Keisha felt every eye in the reception area tracking her movement as she followed Margaret down a hallway lined with oil paintings that probably cost more than her annual salary. Mr. Sterling is still recovering, so please keep the visit brief, Margaret said, her tone suggesting that Keisha's presence was an unfortunate but necessary inconvenience. He's been quite unsettled since the incident. 3 days had passed since the plaza. 3 days since Keisha had performed CPR on a stranger and watched the paramedics shock his heart back into rhythm. 3 days since Alexander Sterling's people had tracked her down through hospital records and insisted, no demanded, that she accept their gratitude in person. She hadn't wanted to come. The $50 Uber ride alone was money she couldn't afford to waste, pulled from the envelope marked Malik's school supplies. But they'd been persistent, calling her cell phone, leaving messages at Mount Sinai, even sending flowers to her apartment building until Mrs. Chun from the front desk complained about the delivery trucks. "I don't need thanks," she'd told Margaret over the phone. "I was just doing my job." But apparently, that wasn't how billionaires operated. Everything had to be a transaction, even basic human decency. The office door opened to reveal Alexander Sterling behind a desk the size of her entire kitchen. He looked different than he had on the plaza, composed, controlled, back in his natural element. The vulnerable man who'd gripped her hand in the ambulance was gone, replaced by someone who belonged in boardrooms and business magazines. Ms. Williams. He stood, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." She shook it briefly, noting how soft his palm was compared to her own calloused hands. "Like I said on the phone, this wasn't necessary. I'm just glad you're okay. Please sit." He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I wanted to express my gratitude properly. What you did was my job," Keisha interrupted, remaining standing. "I'm a cardiac nurse. When someone's having a heart attack, I help them. It's not complicated." Alex blinked, clearly unused to being cut off mid-sentence. "Of course, but you went above and beyond. You saved my life. The paramedics saved your life. I just kept you stable until they arrived." She glanced at her watch, a plastic digital thing that looked ancient in this temple of wealth. "Look, Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the gesture, but I have to get back to work. My supervisor only gave me 30 minutes. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe irritation. "I see. Well, I've prepared something for you." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "A small token of my appreciation." Keisha didn't touch it. "I don't want your money." "It's not charity," Alex said quickly, his businessman instincts kicking in. "Think of it as compensation for your time and trouble." "My time and trouble?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Is that what you call it when someone helps save your life?" Alex set the envelope on the desk between them, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm not sure I understand your objection, Ms. Williams. Surely you could use—" "Could use what?" Keisha's voice rose. "Your pity money? Your guilt payment?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She stepped closer to the desk, her exhaustion from double shifts and dead car batteries and sleepless nights suddenly crystallizing into anger. "You look at me and see what, exactly? A poor black woman from Brooklyn who should be grateful for your scraps." "I never said." "You didn't have to say it." She picked up the envelope and held it out to him. "You people always think everything can be solved with a check. Well, here's some free advice. You can't buy your way out of feeling guilty about how you live." Alex's face hardened. "How I live? You don't know anything about my life. I know enough. I know you've got more money in your petty cash drawer than I make in a year. I know you live in some penthouse while families like mine can barely afford groceries. And I know that when you almost died, the only person who stopped to help was someone you probably wouldn't even notice on any other day. That's not fair. Fair. Keisha laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair is working 3 jobs to keep your son fed and housed. Fair is choosing between medicine and rent money. Fair is having people like you pretend we don't exist until you need something from us. Alex stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I didn't ask you to save me. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Keisha felt something cold settle in her chest. Not hurt, exactly, but recognition. This was who he really was. This was what happened when the mask slipped. No, she said quietly. You didn't. And if I could take it back, if I could let you die on that plaza instead of giving you the chance to show me exactly who you are, maybe I would. She turned toward the door, done with this conversation, done with this place, done with the fantasy that maybe, just for a moment, she'd connected with another human being instead of just performing chest compressions on a stranger's expensive suit. Wait. His voice stopped her at the door. Ms. Williams, wait. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. She looked back at him over her shoulder. That's the problem. You meant every word. Margaret was waiting in the hallway, clipboard in hand, probably ready to escort Keisha back to the world where she belonged. But Alex appeared in the doorway behind her, his face flushed with something that looked almost like panic. Keisha, please. Let me explain. She kept walking toward the elevator, her clogs squeaking against the marble. There's nothing to explain, Mr. Sterling. You're rich, I'm not. You matter, I don't. That's just how the world works. The elevator doors opened like a mouth, ready to swallow her back into her real life of struggling and striving, and trying to build something decent for her son in a world that seemed determined to knock her down. That's not true, Alex called after her as she stepped inside. The doors began to close, but she could still see his face through the narrowing gap, stricken desperate, like a man watching something valuable slip through his fingers. It's the only truth that matters, she said. And then he was gone. The waiting room at Mount Sinai's cardiac unit felt like purgatory, all beige walls and uncomfortable chairs that seemed designed to make anxious people even more miserable. Keisha sat beside Alex's hospital bed, her shift having ended 2 hours ago, but somehow unable to leave. She told herself it was professional obligation, that any good nurse would check on a patient she'd helped save. But the truth was more complicated than that. Alex had been awake for an hour now, the color slowly returning to his face as the medications worked their magic. The doctors said he'd been lucky, a minor heart attack, more warning than catastrophe. But lying there in the thin hospital gown, stripped of his armor of expensive suits and commanding presence, he looked younger. Vulnerable in a way that made Keisha's chest tighten with unexpected sympathy. You don't have to stay, he said quietly, his voice still hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. I'm sure you have somewhere else to be. Keisha glanced at her phone. Malik would be getting out of school soon, and Mrs. Rodriguez could only watch him until 6. She had exactly $43 in her checking account and a car that wouldn't start, which meant taking the subway home and hoping she could figure out transportation for tomorrow's shift. I'm waiting for visiting hours to end anyway, she lied smoothly. My friend's having surgery down the hall. Alex nodded, accepting the deception with the grace of someone who understood that sometimes lies were kinder than truth. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the steady beep of monitors and the distant chatter of nurses in the hallway. "Can I ask you something?" Alex said finally. "Sure." "Why did you help me? I mean, really help me. You could have just called 911 and walked away." Keisha considered the question seriously. It wasn't the first time someone had asked her that, though usually it came from colleagues who couldn't understand why she'd chosen nursing over more lucrative careers, or why she volunteered at the free clinic on weekends when she barely had time to breathe. "My grandmother used to say that we're all just walking each other home," she said. "Some people get lost along the way, and some people know shortcuts, but we're all heading to the same place eventually. Seemed like you needed someone to walk with you for a minute." Alex was quiet for a long moment, processing words that felt foreign in his world of calculated risks and strategic advantages. When was the last time someone had helped him without expecting something in return? He couldn't remember. "What's your story?" he asked. "I mean, what brought you to nursing? You're good at it. Really good. I've been in enough hospitals to know the difference between someone who's just doing a job and someone who actually cares." The compliment caught Keisha off guard. She wasn't used to patients seeing her as anything more than efficient hands and a professional smile. "Long story," she said, deflecting. "I'm not going anywhere." She found herself studying his face, looking for the condescension or privileged curiosity she'd learned to expect from wealthy patients. But his eyes held genuine interest, and something else, a loneliness that felt familiar despite their vastly different circumstances. "My mom got sick when I was 16, she heard herself saying. "Lupus. Spent 2 years in and out of hospitals, and I watched nurses do things that doctors couldn't. Hold her hand during the worst pain, remember her favorite ice chips, treat her like a person instead of a diagnosis. When she died, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Be that person for someone else's mother." "I'm sorry," Alex said, and the words carried weight that surprised them both. "What about you? Always wanted to be a financial titan." There was gentle teasing in her voice that made him smile despite everything. "My father would have said I didn't have a choice. Sterling men don't become teachers or artists or social workers. We make money. Lots of it. That's our contribution to the world." His laugh held no humor. "Took me until today to realize that might not be enough." Before Keisha could respond, his phone rang. Alex glanced at the caller ID, and his entire demeanor shifted. The color drained from his face, and his hand trembled slightly as he reached for the device. "I have to take this," he said, his voice suddenly tight with an emotion Keisha couldn't identify. "Alex." The voice on the other end was female, young, and filled with desperate hope that carried clearly through the phone speaker. "Emma." Alex's voice cracked on the name. Who told you I was here?" "It's on the news, Dad. Wall Street executive suffers heart attack. I saw it on my phone during lunch break." Emma's words tumbled together in a rush. "Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." "Dad." The word hit Keisha like a physical blow. Alex Sterling was someone's father, and from the raw emotion in that young voice, someone who desperately loved him despite whatever had driven them apart. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "I'm going to be fine," Alex said, and Keisha watched tears stream down his face. "But Emma, you shouldn't be calling me your mother." "I don't care what Mom says. I don't care about the restraining order or the lawyers or any of it. You almost died, and I wasn't there. I should have been there. Alex closed his eyes, his free hand gripping the hospital bed rail until his knuckles went white. Sweetheart, you know why things are complicated. What happened with your mother? I know what she told me happened. But I also know my dad, and I know you'd never hurt anyone. I'm 19 now, Dad. I can make my own decisions about who I want in my life. Keisha felt like an intruder witnessing something too intimate for strangers, but she couldn't move. The man who'd seemed so composed and powerful just hours ago was falling apart in front of her, and every instinct she had as a nurse and a mother screamed at her to do something, anything, to ease his pain. Where are you? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. NYU. I'm a sophomore now. Pre-med, actually. Thought maybe you'd like to know that I want to help people too, in my own way. Alex looked up at Keisha, and she saw her own dedication reflected in his daughter's choice. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Emma, I love you. I've missed you every single day for the past 3 years. But if your mother finds out you called, let me worry about Mom. Just tell me you're really okay. Promise me. I promise. And Emma? I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud. The call ended, and Alex sat in stunned silence, still gripping the phone like a lifeline. Keisha had intended to give him privacy, but something in his expression stopped her from leaving. Your daughter? She asked gently. Alex nodded, unable to trust his voice. She sounds like she loves you very much. I haven't spoken to her in 3 years, Alex said finally. My ex-wife. Things got ugly during the divorce. Really ugly. Emma was 16, and she believed everything her mother told her about me. I stopped fighting for custody because I thought it would be better for her to have stability, even if it meant losing her. But she called. She called. The wonder in his voice was heartbreaking. She's studying pre-med. She wants to help people. Keisha thought about Malik, about the fierce love that drove every decision she made, every sacrifice she endured. She thought about what it would feel like to lose him, to have someone convince him that she was the enemy instead of the person who loved him most in the world. Maybe almost losing you helped her remember what really matters, she said. Alex looked at her with something approaching awe. How do you do that? Do what? Find hope in everything, even when things seem impossible. Keisha smiled, thinking of her grandmother's words, of all the patience she'd held through their darkest moments, of Malik's laugh echoing through their tiny apartment. Practice, she said simply. Lots and lots of practice. For the first time in years, Alexander Sterling began to believe that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth more than money after all. The coffee in Keisha's hands had gone cold hours ago, but she clutched the mug anyway, needing something solid to anchor her as Alex's words hung in the air between them. They sat in his penthouse living room, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park, but all she could see was the pain etched across his face. You want to know why that phone call shocked everyone? Alex's voice was barely above a whisper. Because the person I called, she's been dead for 3 years. Keisha's breath caught. What do you mean? Alex stood abruptly, walking to the window with his back to her. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, pale, haunted, broken. Her name was Jasmine. Jasmine Williams. The mug slipped from Keisha's fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Coffee spread in a dark stain, but neither of them moved to clean it up. Williams, she whispered. I know it's a common name, Alex said, still facing the window. But when you told me yours in the ambulance, when you said Keisha Williams from Brooklyn, God, for a moment I thought maybe, he turned around, and she could see tears tracking down his cheeks. She would have been about your age now. Same beautiful eyes. Same way of seeing straight through to someone's soul. Keisha's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Tell me about her. Alex walked to his desk and pulled out a worn leather portfolio. From it, he withdrew a photograph, creased and faded from being handled so many times. He held it out to her with trembling fingers. The girl in the photo was maybe 16, 17 at most. Dark skin, bright smile, wearing a graduation cap and gown. But it was her eyes that made Keisha's world tilt sideways. Those were Malik's eyes. Those were her father's eyes. Where did you get this? Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. She was my girlfriend, Alex said, sinking into the chair across from her. Senior year of high school. I was 18, she was 17. We were going to change the world together. Senior year of high school. Keisha's mind was racing. But you're from Manhattan. Elite schools. Private everything. Alex shook his head. That came later. My father made his money when I was in high school, but before that, we lived in Queens. Astoria. I went to Benjamin Cardozo High School, same as Jasmine. The photograph trembled in Keisha's hands. She knew that graduation cap, knew that smile. She'd seen it in family albums, in the stories her grandmother used to tell about the daughter who'd gotten pregnant too young and died too soon. My mother, she breathed. Alex went completely still. What did you say? Jasmine Williams was my mother. The words felt like shards of glass in her throat. She died when I was 4. Complications from diabetes. My grandmother raised me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of impossible coincidence and 23 years of missed connections. Alex was staring at her like she was a miracle and a nightmare all at once. That would make you. He started. 27, Keisha finished. Born April 15, 1996. Alex's face went white. He fumbled for his phone, scrolling through something with shaking fingers. When he found what he was looking for, he held it out to her. It was a calendar app, and April 15th was circled in red with a single note. Jazz would have been 44. Light a candle. I've marked that date every year for the past decade, he said hoarsely. The day she would have turned another year older. But I never knew. I never knew she had a daughter. Keisha's voice broke. You never knew she had a daughter. She was pregnant when we graduated, Alex continued, his words coming in a rush now, like a dam had burst. But my father. God, my father found out about us. About her. He was furious that I was dating a black girl, said it would ruin his business prospects. He'd just gotten his first big contract, and he was paranoid about appearances. Keisha felt sick. What did he do? He threatened her family. Threatened to have her grandmother evicted from her apartment. Threatened to get her fired from her job at the hospital. Said he'd make sure no one in her family ever worked in New York again. Alex's hands were clenched into fists. And then he offered me a choice. Harvard Business School, full ride, guaranteed internship at Goldman Sachs. All I had to do was walk away from her. And you did. It wasn't a question. I was 18 and stupid, and I thought I could make enough money to protect her eventually. I thought I could come back once I was established, once I had power of my own. His laugh was bitter, broken. I wrote her letters. Dozens of them. But my father intercepted them all. I didn't find out until he died 5 years ago, and I was going through his papers. Keisha was crying now, silent tears that fell onto the photograph of her mother. She never got them. No. And when I tried to find her in college, my father told me she'd moved away. Said she was married to someone else, happy, and I should leave her alone. Alex buried his face in his hands. I believed him. I was a coward, and I believed him. She waited, Keisha said quietly. My grandmother told me. She waited for you until I was almost 2 years old. She kept saying my daddy would come back, that he loved us, that something must have happened to keep him away. The sound Alex made was inhuman, a keening wail of grief and regret that seemed to come from his very soul. I failed her. I failed both of you. She named me after you, Keisha continued, her voice steady despite the tears. Keisha means favorite in Swahili, but that's not why she chose it. She chose it because it sounded like Alex backwards. Keisha. She said I was her love letter to the man who got away. Alex looked up at her, his eyes red and desperate. And your son? Malik. She smiled through her tears. It means king in Arabic. But his middle name is Alexander. The photograph fell from Keisha's lap as Alex crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms. They held each other like survivors of a shipwreck, crying for all the lost years, all the missed moments, all the love that had been buried under 23 years of lies and cowardice and cruel fate. I'm so sorry, Alex sobbed into her hair. I'm so goddamn sorry. She forgave you, Keisha whispered back. Even at the end, even when the diabetes was killing her, she told my grandmother that love doesn't die just because people do. She said someday, somehow, you'd find your way back to us. They stayed like that until the sun set over Manhattan, 2 broken people discovering they were pieces of the same shattered whole. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility, but inside that penthouse, time had stopped. Finally, Alex pulled back just enough to look at her face. What happens now? Keisha wiped her eyes, thinking of Malik at home with Ms. Rodriguez, probably doing his homework at the kitchen table that wobbled on uneven legs. Thinking of the bills piled on her counter, the broken car, the life of struggle that had defined every day since she could remember. But she was also thinking of her mother's stories, of love that transcends time and circumstance, of second chances that arrive disguised as heart attacks and hospital visits and phone calls that shock the world. Now, she said, you meet your grandson. The afternoon sun streamed through the hospital cafeteria windows, casting long shadows across the nearly empty space. Keisha sat across from Alex at a small corner table, 2 cups of terrible coffee growing cold between them. It had been 3 hours since his heart attack, and the color had finally returned to his face. You know, Alex said, stirring his coffee absently, I haven't sat in a hospital cafeteria since I was 12 years old. Yeah? What happened when you were 12? His smile faded slightly. My father had his first heart attack. Same age I am now, actually. I spent 2 weeks sleeping in chairs just like these, eating vending machine sandwiches and pretending I wasn't terrified he was going to die. Keisha studied his face, seeing past the expensive suit and polished exterior to something rawer underneath. Did he make it? He did. Lived another 20 years, actually. But he was never the same. Stopped taking risks, stopped dreaming big. I swore I'd never let fear make me small like that. Alex laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess the universe has a sense of irony. Fear doesn't make you small, Keisha said quietly. It makes you human. There's a difference. She took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. God, this stuff is awful. You'd think a hospital would have decent coffee, right? I can buy you a real cup, Alex offered. There's a place on Fifth Avenue that imports beans from. Alex. She touched his hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. You don't have to buy me anything. We're just talking. He stared down at her hand on his small, with calloused fingertips and a thin gold band on her ring finger that she wore on the wrong hand. A wedding ring repurposed as a memorial. I'm not good at this, he admitted. Just talking. Everything in my world has a transaction attached to it. Someone wants something, or I want something from them. I don't remember the last time someone asked me how I was feeling without wanting to sell me something or get me to invest in their company. Well, I'm asking now. And I'm not selling anything. Keisha smiled. How are you feeling, Alexander Sterling? Scared, he said without hesitation, surprising them both with his honesty. Terrified, actually. Not just about the heart attack. About everything. About the fact that I almost died today, and the only person who would have genuinely missed me is my housekeeper, and only because I pay her really well. Keisha felt something crack open in her chest. That can't be true. It is. I have a company full of employees who depend on me, but they'd find another job. I have clients who trust me with their money, but they'd find another fund manager. I have a mother who calls me twice a year to ask for donations to her various charities, and she'd probably throw a more interesting dinner party with the insurance money. What about friends? Someone you went to college with, or... Friends are liabilities in my business, Alex said flatly. Someone you went to school with becomes someone who knows too much about your past. Someone you trust becomes someone who can betray you. I learned that lesson early. Keisha was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Her own life felt chaotic and overwhelming most days, but it was full of Malik's laughter, full of patients who remembered her name, full of neighbors who looked out for each other because they had to. That sounds lonely, she said finally. It is. But loneliness is predictable. People aren't. Some people are. She thought about Ms. Rodriguez, who watched Malik every morning without being asked and never accepted payment. About Dr. Martinez, who covered her shifts when Malik was sick and never made her feel guilty about it. Some people show up when you need them. Like you did today. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Alex said firmly. I watched dozens of people walk past me. You were the only one who stopped. Why? Keisha considered the question, turning it over in her mind like a smooth stone. My husband used to say that we're all just walking each other home. That every day is a chance to make someone's journey a little easier, a little less scary. She twisted the ring on her finger. He was a paramedic. Died in a car accident 3 years ago, responding to a call. I'm sorry. He would have liked you, she said, and Alex looked skeptical. No, really. He had this theory that people who build walls are usually protecting something worth saving. He'd have seen right through all that isolation you wrap yourself in. And what would he have seen? Someone who's afraid to hope for anything he can't control. Keisha met his eyes. Someone who's forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely cared for. The words hung between them like a challenge. Alex felt exposed, like she'd reached into his chest and pulled out something he'd been hiding even from himself. "What about you?" he asked quietly. "What are you afraid of?" Failing Malik. Not being enough for him. Raising him to think that struggling is normal, that this is all there is. She gestured around the cafeteria, but Alex understood she meant something bigger. "I want him to believe in possibilities, you know? I want him to dream big dreams and not be afraid to reach for them." Sounds like he already has the most important thing. Yeah? What's that? A mother who would run into traffic to save a stranger. A mother who works 3 jobs and still has energy to worry about his dreams. Trust me, that's worth more than all the money in the world. Keisha felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had told her she was doing a good job? When had anyone acknowledged that the constant juggling act of her life was actually an incredible feat of strength? Have you ever had a conversation with a stranger that changed how you see yourself? Tell us about it in the comments. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why did you call your lawyer first? When you were lying on that ground, thinking you might die, the first person you wanted to talk to was your lawyer." Alex's face went carefully blank. "I told you, I needed to make sure my affairs were in order." "But what did you tell him? It wasn't about your will or your company. I could hear it in your voice. It was something else." For a moment, she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I've never told anyone. Something I've been carrying for a long time." He looked out the window at the city beyond. "I have a daughter." Keisha's breath caught. "What?" "Her name is Emma. She's 7 years old. Lives with her mother in Chicago." Alex's voice was barely above a whisper. "I've never met her." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. "Alex. Her mother was someone I was seeing about 8 years ago. When she got pregnant, she told me she didn't want anything from me. No money, no involvement, nothing. She said she'd rather raise the child alone than have me in their lives as some distant, obligated father." He smiled bitterly. "She knew me better than I knew myself." "But you could have." "Could have what? Fought for custody? Forced my way into their lives?" She was right, Keisha. I would have been a terrible father. Still would be. But when I thought I was dying today. His voice broke slightly. All I could think about was that I'd never even tried. That she's out there somewhere, and she doesn't even know my name. Keisha reached across the table and took his hand properly this time, not just a gentle touch but a real grip, anchoring him to the moment. "It's not too late," she said. "It is. I called my lawyer to set up a trust fund for her. Anonymous, untraceable. At least if something happens to me, she'll be taken care of financially. It's the only thing I know how to do. Money isn't the only thing you have to offer. It's the only thing I'm good at." "That's not true." Keisha squeezed his hand. "You want to know what I saw today when you were lying on that ground, scared and vulnerable and human? I saw someone worth saving. I saw someone who says thank you and means it. Someone who asks questions and listens to the answers. Someone who's brave enough to tell the truth when it hurts." Alex looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Not pity, not calculation, not the careful distance of professional courtesy. Just genuine care, freely given, expecting nothing in return. "I don't know how to be a father," he said. "Nobody does, until they are one. And even then, we're all just making it up as we go along." She smiled. "But loving someone, that part's not as complicated as you think." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Alex felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. Fragile and unfamiliar, but real. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping. For staying. For seeing something in me that I'd forgotten was there." The late afternoon light shifted, and for just a moment, the terrible hospital coffee tasted like the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. The charity gala at the Plaza Hotel was supposed to be Alexander Sterling's triumphant return to society. 3 months after his heart attack, he was back, stronger, healthier, and determined to show the world that a moment of weakness hadn't changed him. The ballroom glittered with Manhattan's elite, champagne flutes catching the light from crystal chandeliers as New York's wealthiest congratulated themselves on their generosity. Alex stood near the bar, his Armani tuxedo perfectly tailored, his smile practiced and empty. This was his element, the careful dance of wealth and influence, where every conversation was a transaction and every handshake carried a price tag. He'd slipped back into it like putting on an old coat. "Alexander, wonderful to see you looking so well," Senator Morrison approached with his wife, both beaming with the artificial warmth of political necessity. "I trust you've fully recovered from that incident?" "Completely," Alex replied smoothly, accepting their handshakes. "Just a minor setback. Nothing that could slow down Sterling Capital for long." He said the words automatically, the same script he'd been delivering all evening. But as he spoke, his eyes wandered across the ballroom, searching for something he couldn't name. The truth was, he felt like he was suffocating in this golden cage he'd built around himself. It had been 6 weeks since he'd last seen Keisha Williams. 6 weeks since their last conversation had exploded into accusations and bitter words that still echoed in his mind during the sleepless hours before dawn. She'd accused him of using her, of playing with her emotions like she was just another acquisition. He'd responded with the cold cruelty he'd perfected over years of corporate warfare, telling her she was naive if she thought a single moment of crisis could bridge the gap between their worlds. "You don't know anything about my world," she had said, her voice shaking with hurt and fury. "And you don't want to learn." "Your world," he'd shot back. "You mean the world where everything is a struggle, where there's never enough money, where people work 3 jobs just to survive. I built my entire life getting away from that world, Keisha. Why would I want to go back?" The words had hung between them like a blade. He'd seen something die in her eyes, not just love, but hope itself. She'd gathered up Malik's schoolwork from his coffee table, where they'd been helping him with math problems just minutes before, and walked out of his penthouse without another word. He'd told himself it was for the best. That they were too different, that it would never work. That he'd been temporarily blinded by gratitude and circumstance, nothing more. But now, standing in this ballroom full of people who smiled at his money and laughed at his jokes because they had to, he felt the hollowness eating him alive. "Mr. Sterling." A waiter appeared at his elbow. "You have a call." The gentleman said it was urgent. Alex frowned, following the waiter to a quiet alcove where a hotel phone waited. Who would call him here? Margaret knew better than to interrupt unless it was a genuine emergency. Alexander Sterling. Alex. The voice was unfamiliar, male, older, with a slight rasp that suggested years of cigarettes. "This is Detective Ray Martinez, NYPD. I need to speak with you about Keisha Williams." The champagne glass slipped from Alex's fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Several nearby guests turned to look, but he barely noticed. What about her? Is she, what happened? There's been an incident, sir. Ms. Williams was assaulted tonight outside Mount Sinai Hospital. She's in the ER now, and, well, she's been asking for you. The world tilted sideways. Alex gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. Assaulted? How bad is it? She'll be okay, but she's pretty shaken up. Thing is, Mr. Sterling, the attack wasn't random. Someone was waiting for her. Someone who knew her schedule, knew she worked late on Fridays. We think it might be connected to some recent threats she's been receiving. Threats? Alex's voice came out as a whisper. What kind of threats? Someone's been calling her, texting her, telling her to stay away from people above her station, telling her she doesn't belong in certain neighborhoods. The messages mentioned you specifically, sir. Mentioned that people are watching, that there would be consequences if she didn't back off. The phone receiver felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Alex closed his eyes, and suddenly he could see it all with horrible clarity. The photographs in the society pages after they'd been spotted together, the whispers in boardrooms, the careful way his business associates had started asking about his new interests. He'd been so focused on protecting himself, on maintaining his image, that he'd never considered she might be in danger. The attacker got away, Detective Martinez continued, but we found something interesting in Ms. Williams' purse. A letter. Very expensive paper, typed on what looks like a high-end printer. It basically tells her to disappear, that she's embarrassing important people, and that next time the consequences will be more severe. I'm coming to the hospital, Alex said, already moving toward the ballroom's exit. Mr. Sterling? One more thing. Ms. Williams made it clear she doesn't want to see you. Said to tell you this is exactly what she was afraid of, and that she should have listened to her instincts. But I think you should know, when the EMTs found her, she was clutching something in her hand. A business card. Your business card. The line went dead. Alex stood in the hotel corridor, surrounded by the distant sounds of laughter and music from the gala, feeling like his entire world had just collapsed around him. She'd been hurt because of him. Because he'd been too proud, too selfish, too scared to admit that she'd become the most important thing in his life. He thought about the letter, expensive paper, professional printing. Someone with money, with resources, with connections. Someone from his world who saw Keisha as a threat to the natural order of things. Someone who would rather see her broken than see the barriers between their worlds come down. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Sterling felt ashamed of everything he'd built, everything he represented. The money, the power, the carefully constructed walls that had protected him from feeling too much, they'd all become weapons pointed at the one person who'd made him want to be better. He pulled out his phone and called his driver. Bring the car around. Now. As he waited, he caught sight of his reflection in the hotel's gilded mirrors. The tuxedo, the perfect hair, the cold expression that had served him so well in boardrooms, it all looked like a costume now. A disguise he wore to hide from the truth. The truth was that he loved Keisha Williams. Loved her strength, her compassion, her refusal to be impressed by his wealth. Loved the way she made him want to be worthy of the man she thought he could become. And now, because of his cowardice, she was lying in a hospital bed, hurt and afraid. The elevator doors opened, and Alex stepped inside, watching the numbers tick down toward the lobby. Toward the street. Toward the hospital where the woman he loved was waiting, not for him, but despite him. He'd lost her once through his own stupidity and pride. He wouldn't lose her again. The rain had stopped, but Alexander Sterling stood motionless on the observation deck of the Empire State Building, staring out at the city lights that blurred through his unshed tears. 3 days had passed since Keisha walked away from him outside Mount Sinai. 3 days since she'd thrown his check back in his face and called him everything he deserved to be called. 3 days of hell. His penthouse felt like a mausoleum. His office, with its billion-dollar views and mahogany furniture, seemed like a prison. Every board meeting, every conference call, every interaction reminded him of what he'd lost. Not just Keisha, but the version of himself he'd glimpsed in her presence. The man who could be more than his net worth, more than his reputation, more than the cold calculations that had defined his existence for 38 years. Margaret had been fielding calls all week. The charity gala committee wanted to know if he was still planning to attend. The Japanese investors were concerned about his distraction during their last meeting. His therapist, the one he'd been seeing twice a week since the heart attack, had left 4 messages. But there was only one voice he wanted to hear, and she'd made it clear she was done with him. His phone buzzed. A text from his private investigator. Found the information you requested. Keisha Williams, 847 Maple Street, apartment 3B, Brooklyn. Single mother, works 3 jobs, son Malik age 8. Clean record. Financial situation critical, 3 months behind on rent, facing eviction next week. Alex stared at the screen until the words blurred. He'd hired the investigator not to violate her privacy, but because he needed to understand. How had she managed to save his life while her own was falling apart? How had she found the strength to walk away from money that could have solved all her problems? The elevator chimed behind him. He didn't turn around. This was a private floor, accessible only with his key card. But then he heard footsteps. Slow and deliberate. 38 floors is a long way to climb when the elevators are locked, came a familiar voice. Alex spun around. Keisha stood there, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her head, her chest rising and falling from exertion. She wore the same winter coat she'd had on the day she saved him, but now he could see how thin it was, how the zipper didn't quite close at the top. How did you? Your doorman downstairs is a sweet old man named Henry. Turns out his grandson goes to school with Malik. When I told him who I was, he let me up. She wiped rain from her face with the back of her hand. We need to talk. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs, not the irregular, frightening rhythm of his heart attack, but the steady, powerful beat of hope trying to break through despair. Keisha, let me finish. Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands trembling. I've been angry for 3 days. Furious. I kept thinking about how you tried to buy me, how you made me feel like some charity case, how you reduced everything we shared to a transaction. Each word hit him like a physical blow. He deserved every one of them. But then Malik asked me something tonight. She took a step closer, her dark eyes never leaving his face. He asked me why I was so sad if I'd done something good. He said, "Mama, you saved a man's life. Isn't that supposed to make you happy?" Alex felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it existed. "And I realized," Keisha continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "that I wasn't just angry at you. I was angry at myself. For caring about you. For believing, even for a moment, that someone like you could see someone like me as more than a problem to be solved with money." "You are so much more than that," Alex said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. "Keisha, you're everything. You saved my life in ways you don't even understand. Then why? Her voice broke on the question. Why did you try to pay me off like I was some kind of service provider? Alex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 38 years of emotional cowardice pressing down on him. When he opened them again, Keisha was still there, still waiting, still giving him a chance he didn't deserve. Because I'm terrified, he said simply. I've never felt what I felt with you. I've never needed someone the way I need you. And the only way I've ever known how to handle things that matter is to control them, to buy them, to reduce them to terms I can understand. He took a shaky breath. When you wouldn't take the money, when you walked away, I realized I couldn't control you. And that scared me more than the heart attack. Keisha studied his face in the city lights, searching for something, truth maybe, or the man she'd glimpsed beneath the expensive suits and practiced charm. I'm scared too, she admitted. I'm scared of needing someone who might disappear when things get hard. I'm scared of Malik getting attached to someone who sees us as a project instead of people. I'm scared of believing in something that's too good to be true. It is too good to be true, Alex said, stepping closer. You're too good for me. Too pure, too strong, too everything I'm not. But Keisha, I'm asking you anyway. Not as someone trying to buy your affection, not as someone who thinks money can fix everything. I'm asking as a man who's been dead inside for years until you brought him back to life. The wind whipped around them, carrying the sounds of the city far below, sirens, car horns, the distant hum of 8 million people living their lives. But up here, in this moment, there was only silence between them. Keisha reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. Alex's heart stopped as he recognized it, the check he'd tried to give her. I kept it, she said quietly. Not because I wanted the money, but because I wanted to remember how it felt when you broke my heart. She held it out to him, and he took it with hands that shook like leaves. But I don't want to remember that anymore, she whispered. I want to remember the man who held my hand in that hospital room. The man who called his daughter for the first time in 5 years because nearly dying made him realize what mattered. The man who looked at me like I was worth something. Alex tore the check in half, then in half again, letting the pieces scatter on the wind. You're worth everything, he said. You and Malik. You're worth more than all of it. The money, the business, the life I built around emptiness. We're not a charity case, Alex. We're not your redemption project. I know. He reached for her hands, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. You're my salvation. Both of you. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life earning the right to love you. For a long moment, Keisha said nothing. She just stood there, looking at their joined hands, at the man who'd been a stranger 4 days ago and now held her heart in his trembling fingers. Malik likes you, she said finally. He keeps asking when Mr. Alex is coming back. And what do you tell him? She looked up then, and Alex saw tears streaming down her face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of pain. I tell him, she whispered, that Mr. Alex is going to have to prove he's worth waiting for. Alex pulled her into his arms then, holding her against his chest as the city sprawled beneath them like a constellation of possibilities. He could feel her heartbeat against his, strong, steady, alive. The rhythm of hope. I'll prove it, he promised against her hair. Every day for the rest of my life, I'll prove it. And for the first time since his heart attack, Alexander Sterling felt truly alive. 6 months later, late August. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the cozy 3-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, Chicago, casting golden light across the kitchen table where Maya Williams Sterling sat grading nursing school assignments. The hyphenated name still felt new on her tongue, but it represented something she'd never thought possible, a future built on love rather than survival. "Mama, Mr. Alex is burning the pancakes again." Malik's voice carried from the kitchen, followed by the sound of the smoke detector beeping frantically. Maya laughed, setting down her red pen. "Alex, do you need help in there?" "I've got it under control," came the slightly panicked response, followed by more beeping and what sounded suspiciously like a string of very quiet curse words. Maya padded into the kitchen in her slippers to find Alex waving a dish towel at the smoke detector while a pan of decidedly blackened pancakes smoked on the stove. Malik stood on his step stool beside him, trying to help by blowing upward at the detector. "We're making breakfast in bed for you," Malik announced proudly. "It was supposed to be a surprise." "Well, it's definitely surprising," Maya said, reaching over to turn off the burner and open the window. "What's the occasion?" Alex finally managed to silence the smoke detector and turned to her with flour in his dark hair and what looked like pancake batter on his Harvard MBA sweatshirt. "Can't a man make breakfast for his wife without needing an occasion?" "Wife?" Maya raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't suppress her smile. "I don't remember getting married." "Yet," Alex said, pulling her into his arms despite his flour-covered state. "You haven't gotten married yet." Before Maya could respond, Malik was tugging on both their shirts. "Are you gonna ask her now? You said you were gonna ask her." Maya looked between them, her heart starting to race. "Ask me what?" Alex took a deep breath, and suddenly the burnt pancakes and smoky kitchen faded into the background. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box that made Maya's breath catch in her throat. "Maya," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "6 months ago, you saved my life in more ways than one. You taught me what it means to love someone more than yourself, to put family before profit, to find joy in small moments like burnt pancakes and smoke detectors." Tears were already streaming down Maya's face, but she didn't say anything, just listened as the man she'd fallen completely in love with poured his heart out in their smoky kitchen. "You've shown me what home really means," Alex continued. "Not a penthouse with a view, but this Sunday morning chaos with the people who matter most. Malik asking me to help with his science projects. You falling asleep on my chest while we watch movies. Family dinners where we actually talk instead of staring at our phones." Malik was bouncing on his toes with excitement, clearly struggling to contain himself. "Maya Williams," Alex said, dropping to one knee right there between the stove and the kitchen island, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life burning pancakes for you and Malik? Will you let me be the luckiest man alive?" Maya looked down at the man who'd gone from stranger to patient to friend to the love of her life, and she couldn't speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Instead, she nodded frantically, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple, elegant solitaire that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the kitchen walls. Then he stood and kissed her while Malik cheered and clapped, and the apartment filled with the kind of joy that money could never buy. "Group hug," Malik declared, wrapping his arms around both their waists. "We're gonna be a real family now." "We already were a real family," Maya said, ruffling his hair. "This just makes it official." 3 hours later. The Sterling Capital Management Building looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago, but Alex felt like a completely different person walking through its marble lobby. Maya and Malik flanked him, both dressed in their best clothes for what Maya had teasingly called the big announcement. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked as they rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor. "Terrified," Alex admitted. "But not about the board meeting. About whether Malik's going to behave himself in my office." "I'll be good," Malik promised, though his eyes were wide with excitement at seeing where Alex worked. "Can I sit in your big chair?" "We'll see," Alex said, just as the elevator doors opened to reveal Margaret waiting with her usual clipboard and professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said, then turned to Maya and Malik with genuine warmth. "Mrs. William Sterling, Malik. It's wonderful to see you both again." "It's just Williams until the wedding," Maya corrected gently. "But thank you, Margaret." "The board is assembled in Conference Room A," Margaret said to Alex. "They're curious about this emergency meeting you called." Alex took Maya's hand, feeling the unfamiliar weight of her engagement ring against his palm. "They're about to become a lot more curious." Conference Room A held 12 of Chicago's most powerful financial minds, men and women who collectively controlled assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars. They looked up expectantly as Alex entered with Maya and Malik, their expressions ranging from confused to mildly annoyed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alex began, moving to stand at the head of the polished conference table, "thank you for gathering on short notice. I have some announcements to make regarding the future direction of Sterling Capital Management." Board member Harrison Clark, a silver-haired man who'd known Alex since his Harvard days, leaned forward. "Alex, is this really the appropriate venue for personal?" "This is exactly the appropriate venue," Alex interrupted smoothly, "because what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how this company operates." He looked around the table at faces he'd known for years, people he'd made rich, people who'd helped him build his empire. Good people mostly, but people who'd never questioned whether profit was the only measure of success. "6 months ago, I nearly died of a heart attack," Alex continued. "I was saved by this woman, Maya Williams, a single mother and nurse who stopped to help a stranger when everyone else just walked by." Maya squeezed his hand encouragingly, while Malik sat quietly in one of the leather chairs, eyes wide at the grandeur of the boardroom. "That experience taught me something I should have learned years ago," Alex said. "Success without purpose is just expensive emptiness. Profit without compassion is just sanctioned greed." The board members exchanged glances, clearly wondering where this was heading. Effective immediately, Sterling Capital Management will be restructuring its investment philosophy. 50% of our portfolio will be dedicated to ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance funds that prioritize positive impact alongside financial returns. Board member Patricia Hoffman cleared her throat. "Alex, while we appreciate your personal growth, our fiduciary duty is to maximize returns for our clients." "And we will," Alex said firmly. "But we're going to do it in a way that builds communities instead of just bank accounts. We're partnering with organizations that provide job training for single mothers, microloans for small businesses in underserved communities, and healthcare initiatives in urban areas." "This is highly irregular," Harrison began. "This is highly overdue," Alex cut him off. "For too long, we've treated money like it exists in a vacuum, like our decisions don't affect real people's lives. Maya taught me that every investment decision we make has a human cost. It's time we started accounting for that." He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. "Anyone who's uncomfortable with this new direction is welcome to resign. I'll provide generous severance packages and glowing recommendations." But sterling capital management is going to be a force for positive change, not just wealth accumulation. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Patricia spoke up. What kind of returns are we projecting with this new model? Alex smiled. Conservative estimates suggest we'll maintain our current return rates while generating measurable positive social impact. But more importantly, we'll be able to sleep at night knowing our success isn't built on other people's struggles. One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. They might not fully understand Alex's transformation, but they trusted his business acumen enough to follow his lead. "There's one more thing," Alex said, his voice growing softer. "Maya and I got engaged this morning." The room erupted in congratulations and applause, with even the stuffiest board members smiling at the obvious happiness radiating from the couple. "The wedding will be small and intimate," Alex continued, "but you're all invited to the reception. Fair warning, there will be dancing, and Maya has promised to teach me the electric slide." The laughter that filled the boardroom was warm and genuine, so different from the polite chuckles that usually echoed off these walls during meetings. As the board members filed out, chattering excitedly about the changes ahead, Maya approached Alex with Malik in tow. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "That took real courage." "I learned from the best," Alex replied, pulling her close. "You've been showing me what real courage looks like since the day we met." "Does this mean you're going to help poor people now?" Malik asked, tugging on Alex's suit jacket. Alex knelt down to Malik's level, straightening the boy's small tie. "It means we're all going to help each other. Rich people, poor people, everyone in between. Because that's what families do, they take care of each other." Malik nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin. "Can I tell my friends at school that my new dad is going to save the world?" "Your new dad is going to try his best to make it a little better," Alex said, his throat tight with emotion. "With your mom's help, and yours too." The apartment was quiet except for the soft sounds of Malik's breathing from his new bedroom, the first time in his life he'd had a room of his own. Maya and Alex sat on their small balcony, watching the Chicago skyline light up against the darkening sky. "Are you sure about all this?" Maya asked, twirling her engagement ring around her finger. "The company changes, the marriage, instant parenthood. It's a lot." Alex was quiet for a moment, thinking about the man he'd been 6 months ago, isolated, driven by nothing but the next deal, the next acquisition, the next way to prove his worth through his net worth. "You know what I was doing the morning I had my heart attack," he said finally. "Working, I assume." "I was looking at market futures, planning a hostile takeover of a small family business because their property values had gone up and I saw an opportunity." Alex shook his head. "I never even thought about the 3 generations of family history I'd be destroying, the employees who'd lose their jobs, the community that would lose a local institution." Maya took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "But that morning, when you knelt down beside me in that plaza, when you looked at me like I mattered simply because I was human, Maya, that was the first time in decades that someone saw me as more than my bank balance." Alex turned to face her fully. "You saved my life, yes. But more than that, you gave me a reason to live it." "And you gave me hope," Maya said softly. "For 8 years, I survived by keeping my world small, by not letting anyone too close, by never expecting too much. You taught me that it's okay to want more than survival. It's okay to want happiness." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching planes blink across the star-filled sky, listening to the distant sounds of the city that had brought them together. "Maya," Alex said eventually. MMM. When we tell this story to our grandchildren someday, what do you think the moral will be? Maya smiled, remembering the scared, lonely woman she'd been just 6 months ago, working 3 jobs and afraid to dream of anything beyond making it through each day. I think, she said, the moral will be that love isn't about fixing each other's problems or filling each other's empty spaces. It's about choosing to face life's problems together, and discovering that the empty spaces weren't really empty at all. They were just waiting for the right person to help fill them with joy. Alex kissed her then, soft and sweet under the Chicago stars, while somewhere in the apartment behind them, Malik dreamed of science projects and family dinners and a future where love was the most valuable currency of all. And in that moment, Alexander Sterling, billionaire CEO turned devoted family man, realized that he'd finally found the one investment that would pay dividends for the rest of his life. A home built on love, laughter, and the simple revolutionary act of choosing each other every single day.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can never imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.